Welcome to today's webinar, where we will explore the proven impact of digital inclusion. During today's session, we'll discuss why in this time of increasing uncertainty and change, web accessibility and digital inclusion is more important than ever before. We'll examine case studies and share recent examples of accessible online communications, taking a look at the benefits to both brand and consumer. We'll also take a look at the meaningful impact of digital inclusion and inclusive design, not only for disabled people, but for every single website user. So first off, some housekeeping. I'm Donna Thompson, and I'll be your host and one of the speakers on behalf of TextHelp for today's session. Hopefully you're all connected to the webinar okay, and you can hear my voice and you can see the slides. If you're not familiar with GoToWebinar software, you should see a little panel on the right-hand side of your screen that looks something like the one displayed on the slide now. In here, you can control your audio settings. And as an attendee, you're on listen-only mode so that everyone attending can have a good listening experience. So we encourage you to ask questions though, whether it's about the material being presented or a technical issue that you may experience. You can submit them to us at any time throughout the presentation using the questions section on the GoToWebinar panel. We just flick along to the next slide there, we'll see the panel. So we'll monitor them as we go along. Today's webinar will be recorded and we'll share the recording and the slides with you early next week. So let's introduce today's panelists and get on with the show. So as I said to you earlier, I'm Donna Thompson. I am marketing manager here at TextHelp. And as you'll find out during the presentation or the webinar, I'm passionate about digital inclusion, accessibility, and enabling inclusive online user experiences for everyone. It's my vision is a digital world where no barriers exist, where everyone can participate fully and independently, regardless of ability. Louise, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, my name is Louise. I'm the Accessibility Solutions Manager here at TextHelp. Bit of background about me. I've worked with TextHelp for just coming up on 8 years now, and my role has really varied over the years, working in our North American, Australian and European markets. My role now is focused working predominantly with the public and private sector in the UK and in Ireland to really help educate and promote the importance of accessibility, both externally and internally for an organisation, and to really help drive that digital inclusion message globally. It would be great to carry on the conversation after today, so please feel free to contact me on LinkedIn if you'd like to learn more.
Lovely, that's great, Louise, thank you. Okay, let's get on with today's session then. So let me start by telling you a little bit about why we at TextHelp care so much about creating accessible digital experiences for everyone. So our vision here at TextHelp is a world where difference, disability or language are no longer barriers. Couple that with our mission to help unlock everyone's full potential through innovative technology, and you get a real sense of what we're about. So we recognise the importance of supporting all web users, and especially those who are digitally excluded for one reason or another. And our software is already helping millions of people all over the world to participate in the digital world. And as it says on the slide, it really is in our DNA to support our customers and their users to reach their full potential. To give you an example, our web accessibility software, BrowseAloud, helps to make websites more inclusive by adding speech, translation and a whole host of reading support tools in a neat little toolbar. It helps web visitors to better navigate through websites, understand the content and interact with the site independently. It's ideal for people with hidden disabilities such as dyslexia, or those with visual impairments, or who lack the basic digital skills, or who speak a different language to the one on the site. So it's super easy to install and even easier to use, but it makes a huge difference to the lives of millions of website visitors every day. And as you can probably tell, we're really passionate about digital inclusion, and we're so proud that through BrowseAloud, we empower people to shop, browse, and access essential information online independently. In fact, looking at recent stats, we can see that our usage has gone up 50% since the pandemic. So we feel some comfort that our services are helping web visitors to better understand the important information on our customer websites at this time. So as part of our work in this area of digital inclusion, we have helped to create inclusive digital experiences for many organisations across multiple industries all over the world. Canon Recruitment, for example, Ontario Library, the Ombudsman for Banking Services and Investments in Canada. In Ireland, we work with the Broadcasting Authority, for example, and in the UK, hundreds of NHS organisations and hundreds of councils all over the UK, the US, Canada and Australia. So overall, we are helping thousands of organisations to increase the importance of making their online information available to everybody, regardless of ability or skills. So why should we care about web accessibility? Why does it matter? Well, let's take a look at the facts first. So according to recent research, 15% of the global population has a disability. And what does that really mean in numbers? Well, 15% of the world's population is 61 million people in America. That's 1 in every 4. And globally, it's 1 billion people. So that's a lot of people who potentially face barriers when visiting your website. So let's take a closer look at who make up this group of 1 billion people. So more than 285 million people across the world are estimated to be living with sight loss and visual impairments that are severe enough to have significant impact on their daily lives. This group of 285 million people will absolutely struggle to browse the web like you and I might be able to. Think about the small fonts you come across, or the walls of text with no clear paragraph breaks or headings, or the lack of captions on videos or alt tags on images. Think about your own website. Are there areas that you could improve to make it easier for everyone to access? Moving on to the wider umbrella of people with neurodiversities, did you know that 1 in 7 people are neurodiverse? So this includes attention deficit disorders, autism, Asperger's, dyslexia and dyspraxia. It means that 1 in 7 people may be distracted by the audio or video noises on your site, or struggle to use the fonts and the contrast between images and text. Those with dyslexia, for example, may not be able to understand the complicated sentence structures or the use of jargon, which can be particularly overwhelming. So looking at literacy levels, the average American adult reads at an 8th grade level, and over 67 million people in America speak English as a second language. So this group may struggle to understand your content, especially if it uses complicated language or is presented in walls of text as opposed to small bite-sized paragraphs. All of these groups that I've just mentioned are protected by the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and the Equality Act in the UK, which states that service providers must not discriminate against disabled people. Your website is considered a service, so by law it should be accessible to everyone. So the law aside for now, the benefits of creating accessible and inclusive online platforms are huge. The market of people with disabilities is large and growing as the global population ages. The global spending power of people with disabilities and their families is nearly $7 trillion. That's a huge group to ignore. And with this in mind, it's more important now than ever before that we get accessibility right. So if you're struggling with accessibility or simply haven't prioritized it yet, you're not alone. A massive 98% of websites fail to meet accessibility standards. We're talking websites from all industries, retail, health trusts, local authorities, and financial institutions. The problem is huge, but the solutions can be so easy to make, and the benefits are more than worth it. So which hopefully you'll recognize by the end of our presentation. If your website isn't easy to use or accessible to people with disabilities or literacy issues, you could be losing out on real revenue. In 2019, for example, more than 4 million people in the UK abandoned a retail website because of the barriers they found, taking their money elsewhere. 11% will speak to someone else about the problem, which of course could paint a very negative picture of your brand. Put simply, your competitors could really be winning out because of your poor accessibility choices. But if you address accessibility now, achieving market leader status is in your sector is well within your grasp. So some stats from a recent ClickAway Pound survey really stand out for me. So they report that 80% of users with access needs feel accessibility is more important than making spending decisions than price. So these users aren't searching for the cheapest, they're searching for the easiest route to buy. Even more interesting is the fact that 82% of users with access needs would spend more online if there were fewer barriers, and 85% limit their shopping to sites they know are barrier-free. The problem is you might not even know when you're losing a customer, because only 7% of people with access needs will ever contact a website owner about the barriers they experience. This means a whopping 93% will be likely browsing straight for another website or finding a different source if you don't meet their needs. The one final point I'd like to make is about the cost of transactions. It's well known that the cost of digital transactions is much lower than telephone or face-to-face conversations. However, if users experience accessibility problems on a website, more than 7% of them will phone a helpline for advice. Have you ever considered the cost savings your business could be achieving if you encourage users to self-serve rather than reaching out for support through offline channels? Making your website accessible to all and driving customers to self-serve online offers 24/7 access to services and information. Whilst delivering considerable cost and efficiency savings, the numbers really do speak for themselves. So I want to end by taking a step back and really just reminding you that inclusive design helps everyone, not just disabled users. And one of the most well-known examples of this is Vint Cerf, a hearing impaired computer scientist at Google. He was part of a research team back in the 70s. So the team was tasked to finding new ways to share documents without talking on the phone. Their 1981 network led to the creation of the sophisticated internet we know today. So in the process of implementing web accessibility best practices, you're likely to discover and correct usability problems that were affecting all of your visitors. You'll also be making it easy for mobile phone users to access your information from their small screens, which actually reminds me about the 3 Finnish engineers who invented SMS text messaging, also in the 80s. They figured out a way for deaf people to communicate with one another without speaking, texting instead. So what started out as an invention for the disabled community grew global legs when it was revealed that text messaging presented a more effective solution for saving telecom bandwidth. Now people text more than talk on their smartphones. In the US alone, smartphone users send and receive 5 times more texts than they make and receive calls. And over the last decade, the number of monthly texts sent has increased by more than 7,700%, a pretty popular invention, you might say. So back to websites specifically, accessibility improvements often lead to cleaner, more simplified web designs with easier navigation, content written in plain English, and other elements that work to improve the overall user experience. You know, it can also improve SEO. You improve your user experience and your site will have lower bounce rates, higher conversion rates, and less negative feedback, and other positive benefits outside of making life easier for those with additional needs. So I think you've probably heard enough of my voice for now. I'm going to pass you over to Louise for a little bit, who has some great success stories from organisations who are getting accessibility right. So you'll hear about their journey and the steps they put in place to be more accessible. So Louise, over to you.
Thanks, Donna. Some really interesting figures there, which really show how important accessible websites are. What I'm going to do now is look at some of the real life examples of web accessibility that are happening right around us. So there's new accessibility laws in the UK that mean public sector websites must have a AA rating, as this is set out by the Web Content Accessible Guidelines, or the WCAG as they are commonly known, and also from the Web Accessibility Initiative, so the WAI. So the NHS Digital team took steps to simplify the content across all sections, and they invested a lot of time in trying to reduce distractions and confusing features. As part of the project, PDFs were reduced from 12,000 to a few hundred, which is a huge achievement. We all know that there can be massive accessibility issues with PDFs, so this was a huge amount of work. Interestingly, the reduction in reliance on PDF content led to a much improved SEO for the NHS sites. Google ranking and search engine traffic was better than ever before. They also did a massive overhaul of the content that was provided. So improving technical aspects of the website was not enough. And though the new site templates tripled the A rating, when the team uploaded their content, they found that it had dropped. So the content itself wasn't accessible. Now all content on the public-facing website is written so that 8-year-olds can understand it, while content on the professional-facing website is written for 12-year-olds. So people, even experts, prefer reading information in simpler terms. Jargon has been reduced, redundant text removed, and the reading age is considered for all new pages and posts. Overall, the NHS team have found that the more accessible they make their websites for people with disabilities and digital challenges, the more it is used by all visitors. So we work with over 100 NHS organisations, trusts and clinical commissioning groups in the UK, and everyone has reported that when they improve accessibility on their site, the usage numbers rise along with their engagement. So really this is proving that accessibility is good for all. So another success story comes from Tesco, who managed to generate an extra £13 million, that's almost $16 million US, by making their website more inclusive. What I liked about the retail giant's approach was that this involved those with disabilities throughout the design process. Tesco involves around 20 users with visual impairments as they designed their new shopping website. When the beta version was ready, they recruited another 70 people to test and feedback on their experience. This helped improve the issues around things like colour contrast. So colour contrast is one of those things that can often be overlooked as a web accessibility problem. People who have low vision could find it difficult to read text from a background colour if it is too low in contrast. So this needs to be considered throughout the design process. You should also never use colour as a visual cue. So when you're communicating something important, showing an action or prompting a response, people with colour blindness will have a hard time understanding your content. Organisations should try to use indicators other than colour, such as text labels or patterns. For example, if you're showing errors on the screen, don't rely on coloured text alone. Add an icon to include a title to a message. It could also consider adding visual cues such as font weight or an underlying text style to link into the paragraph so that the links really stand out. The feedback from users also led to Tesco stripping out a lot of unneeded images from their website. So they improved the descriptions on all of their images via alt tags. They totally revamped the main site's layout, introduced a more intuitive navigation journey and a new menu bar. The whole redesign cost Tesco's $35,000. So throughout the process, Tesco's digital team worked towards the principle that users should be able to make their purchases of 30 items within 15 minutes. So the resulting improvements led to an increase of £13 million, as I said, $16 million per year in sales. So that's huge. There were additional benefits too. The accessible and simplified site performed better on mobile devices and on low-speed connections than ever before. So again, really making that experience better for all. So Legal and General have also done great things in the name of accessibility. Like Tesco, they started in exactly the right place and conducted an accessibility audit and usability testing of existing sites. They also reached out to existing customers and conducted market research around their experience on the website. And they also asked for information on any pain points or blockers as they tried to interact online, so that any changes they'd like to see implemented. The digital team focused mainly on accessibility needs of their target audience. So who were most likely to be excluded or obstructed by inaccessible websites? Usually those with low digital skills, print disabilities, non-native speakers, and older customers were the focus. The design of their new platform was informed by this research, and the beta version was then tested with groups of users who often face digital exclusion, and the results spoke for themselves. There was an influx of customer feedback and praise on the much improved site, and complaints about accessibility issues moved from the hundreds to 0. Overall, website visitors receiving quotations doubled within 3 months, and Legal & General reported 100% return on investment before their first year had ended. There were also additional benefits as well. So within 24 hours, natural search engine traffic increased by 25%. With a few weeks, they had experienced a 50% increase. Google clearly liked the new site as much as the customers did. Legal & General enjoyed a significant improvement on Google rankings for their target keywords and search terms. The site was faster than ever before, and page load times were reduced by 75%. It also performed much better again on mobile devices. And because the platform was more simple, streamlined and usable, there was a reduction in maintenance costs of around 66%. So a project definitely worth undertaking, I think you'll agree. So Verizon Media has also been noted for a strong approach to ensuring the inclusivity of its websites and apps. The company behind Yahoo, AOL and HuffPost have built accessibility and inclusion into the heart of everything that they do. In fact, every Monday they have a group of new starts and a tour of the accessibility labs is part of their very first experience of Verizon. Most new hires have not heard the word accessibility. Verizon tells them the reason they focus on it so much is that everyone has an equal experience with their websites and apps. They have recognised that over 1 billion people in the world have some form of disability. So they want to grow. They have to include that percentage of the population that has often not been included in the past. The company says that they have 3 main purposes behind their accessibility labs. Firstly, to educate. So make sure everyone knows what accessibility is, why it's important, and how to integrate accessibility into everything they do. The second component is particularly for product teams, so that those with development or design in focus. So they can use the same types of assistive technologies as those with disabilities might be using when they come to designing websites and apps. The third component of the accessibility labs is where they use them as a showplace and make sure to bring users with disabilities to provide feedback on all the apps and websites. At every stage in the process, accessibility is considered as a beginning idea and not as an afterthought. And the main accessibility features on Verizon's products include video captioning. So all of the videos, original content videos, they have captions. So Yahoo Finance, for example, captions 8 hours of live videos each day. So these can be useful for people who are deaf or have hearing loss. People without hearing loss now are commonly used to reading captions instead of listening to sound, either because they prefer to read rather than listen or because they're in a busy public environment. So keyboard support, if someone is using a keyboard only and unable to use a mouse or touchpad, they can navigate Verizon's websites and apps just by using their keyboard. High contrast, as we mentioned before, so Verizon aims to make sure its background ratio is 4.5 to 1 for people with colour blindness, dyslexia and other visual impairments. So dynamic text resizing. So if a user wants to zoom in on any Verizon website or app, they can do that without the content being distorted. So this is useful for people who have reduced vision or can suffer from eye strain, for example. So labels and descriptions for screen readers. So screen readers are used for people who are blind or who have significant sight loss. So developers accurately describe items and pictures on the page during the development stage. So this gives the users more information about what to expect on the screen. Now let's talk about the tech giant Google. So we work closely with Google and are an official Google partner. So there's no doubt that their investment in accessibility and designing for people with disabilities has given Google an innovation edge in comparison to many of its competitors. The company has often stated that features they introduce with accessibility in mind have improved digital experiences for all users, not just for those with disabilities. So imagine you're sitting on the grass in a sunny spot. Even though the sun is shining directly overhead, most of the time and with most major apps, you can still read the screen. That's because they use Android's accessibility guidelines for contrast, And while those guidelines were established to help those with limited vision to be able to see what's on the screen more easily, it has a trickle-down effect to everyone who wants to be able to use their smartphone in the sun. So autocomplete is also something that Google initially designed for web users with disabilities. However, think about how often we all use it now. It's become one of the most popular features and it's used by millions of people every day. And voice control was originally designed for users with physical impairments, so to help them control their computer, navigate the web. But of course, it is now being so widely adopted by most of us in most of our devices throughout our own home, and voice control is one of the main features. So as we've talked about previously, our tool BrowseAloud is helping organisations make their online information available to everyone, regardless of ability or skill. So we work with many organisations across multiple industries, and I wanted to highlight a couple of these key organisations and why they felt BrowseAloud would help increase their online reach. So first one is Nutricia Homeward, and they required a solution that would empower them to provide a more comprehensive service to their customers. So a solution that would allow them to share vital information with their customers and the families and carers. On feedback, they provided that they chose BrowseAloud because it had added value with features that allowed diverse users to interact with their online content. And of particular significance to Nutricia Homeward is the ability to translate information into multiple languages quickly and easily. Then with over 1,500 homes across Scotland and 500 employees, Blackwood Homes and Care is a leading provider in managing and building highly accessible homes and delivering high quality, innovative care and support. Their objective is simple: to help people live their lives to the fullest. So their solution to help support patients and caregivers was to offer BrowseAloud on their website. They commented that it was easy to install and the range of features really helped support their diverse audience. We also work with Markham Stouffville Hospital as one of their child development programs, and they're based in Canada. And this offers services to children from birth to kindergarten, and it's funded by the Ontario Ministry of Children and Youth Services. And what the organisation is aiming to do is to optimise communication, hearing and vision potential of infants and young children. So the reason they decided to provide BrowseAloud was because they felt the support the BrowseAloud toolbar offered was integral to helping to improve access to information for families across Ontario. They noted that staff found it extremely useful and were able to recommend it to families as a support when accessing the website. So lastly, let's look at a few of the additional benefits to prioritising web accessibility. So outside of your disabled users, your wider customer base will appreciate you taking steps to become more inclusive. What your brand does to create social value and support those with extra needs really matters to the majority of people. There are huge brand reputational benefits to be enjoyed if your organisation is seen to be doing the right thing. For example, research suggests that 63% of consumers prefer to purchase products and services from companies that stand for a purpose, especially companies that reflect their own values and belief. They also avoid companies that don't align with that. It's also been reported that 56% of people are willing to pay more for a good or service from a company known for commitment to social value. Improving user experience for disabled users and those with access needs has actually been shown to improve financial performance. It can enhance brand image and reputation. It can increase customer loyalty, increase ability to attract and retain employees, and provide access to capital and funding. So it's a no-brainer, really. So that really brings us to the end of today's presentation. So I'm going to hand back to Donna and see if we have any questions from our listeners today. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Louise. It's always interesting, I think, to hear about the steps other organisations are taking to support digital inclusion. You know, we can all learn from their experiences. So let's take a look at the questions then that have come in during our chat. So the first one here, let's see. Louise, can you give me some more information on the legislation around web accessibility and what do I need to know?
Okay, so probably one of the biggest legislation drivers is the WCAG guidelines, which I think we had touched on earlier today, and that's really the global standard to review information on your website and to look at that. And one of the big things there is looking at the content on your website and making sure that information is available to everybody. We have loads of resources and guides if you'd like to learn more, but some of the key things to be thinking of when you're looking is really looking at that AA specification and legislation through WCAG.
Lovely. Okay. There's another one here, actually, Louise, about WCAG that you could probably answer. So when people talk about web accessibility, they talk a lot about WCAG. Can you tell me more about what that actually means?
Yeah, so WCAG is really looking at how you're presenting that content and designing your website. So even thinking about how people with conditions integrate with your website. So are they using screen readers? I think we had talked about one of the organizations in particular. They do their testing with screen readers to make sure that the website integrates with that. Looking at alt tags behind images, so making sure that those can be picked up, and even looking at the reading ages of some of that information. So there is lots of information out there, and again, if anybody has any particular questions, we can certainly share more information on that. But I think some of the examples that we had shared is really looking at how to create that content and thinking of accessibility in mind from the get-go.
Lovely. Okay, that's good. There's one here about content. Maybe I'll take this one. So it says, when our website was redesigned, we did so with accessibility in mind. So it's technically pretty good. However, at times, I think we could do a better job with the content we add to the site. Do you have any advice around this? So yeah, so I mean, Louise has talked about the WCAG there, and the standard really was created by the Web Accessibility Initiative of the World Wide Web Consortium. And some aspects of web accessibility are of a technical nature, so they are entrusted to web developers and designers, you know, to take care of things like fonts and colors and contrast ratios. But there are a number of things that are really important for the content writers to be mindful of whenever they're writing for the web. So I'll run through a couple of tips really that you know, would be quite useful. So the first one really is about language. So use really clear and simple language. The average reading age is quite low, and we're bombarded with messages all day long. So the clearer that you can make your message, the more likely it will be remembered. When using acronyms, remember to write them out full the first time you use them, and try to avoid any technical terms or jargon. I know this isn't always possible, but you know, consider who your audience, your target audience is before writing the content, and really tailor the message to them. Thinking about structure as well, structuring your content. So following on from the last point there, the structure of your content can also enhance its readability. So shorter paragraphs, for example, using headings and even bullet points instead of long, complicated sentences can all help. So it's much easier to digest a well-structured piece of content than a blanket wall of text. So thinking about headings then, use real headings. So, you know, what I mean by this is use the structured elements that define the hierarchy of your headings. So for example, H1 is the most important heading, followed by H2, H3, and so on. Structuring your headings this way makes your content much more accessible to people relying on screen readers, for example, to navigate between different sections on the page. Thinking about links then, you know, make sure they're meaningful. Links should be descriptive, so they should tell me what I'll find when I click on that link. Thinking again about the people relying on screen readers to navigate through sites, they may decide to read all the links on the page first to get a real feel for the content. And if all of your links say or start with click here or read more, it's not entirely helpful. Equally with images, it's really good practice to add alternative text to your images to provide your web visitors with a description of the image that may have, when they have difficulties viewing it themselves. This is also really good actually for SEO. Some content management systems won't publish your content if your alt tags are missing, which is really good, but unfortunately they're not all the same. I'm thinking about video as well. Transcriptions and captions like what we're using today present the spoken content as written text. Providing the written text for the audio is so important for people who can't hear well or at all, speak English as a second language, want to grasp the content more quickly and efficiently, or really need to hear the content over distracting sound wherever they're listening. One of the final things I'll just say is about PDFs and any documents that you have on your website that's downloadable. So try and make them as accessible as possible, by providing them in an accessible format. There's probably loads to take from that question. Let's see what else we've got. So how can I get buy-in across my organization to get everyone on board with the importance of accessibility? I can take this one as well, actually, Louise. I guess the advice really would be to start at the top, educate your senior team about the huge global audience that you're potentially missing out on because of the way your accessibility is designed. Thinking about differentiation then, as we said earlier, 98% of websites fail accessibility tests. So stand out from the crowd, reap the rewards. Think about that $7 trillion spending power that you're currently not tapping into. And then cost, the cost of making these accessibility adjustments is nothing compared to the huge opportunities that you open up your business to by making your website more accessible. And really, once you get buy-in from the top, it'll be so much easier to convince the rest of the business that it is the right thing to do. You'll have more advocates and a stronger voice from the start. So let's see, I think we have one more question, Louise, here that maybe you could answer. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure our website isn't very accessible, but I'm really keen to get better. What's the best way to start, and what should be my first step?
Well, I think just based on the sort of examples that we've given, very much for a lot of people, it's starting from what support do you think, knowing your audience and looking at the support that they need. So actually thinking, okay, what is it our users are trying to do? Are they trying to buy services? Are they trying to access services? Are we trying to share information? What information are we putting out? So it does really start with a bit of a looking inwards and reviewing what information you're currently sharing. One of the big things I know that Verizon do, obviously, is getting that end user feedback and testing. So, I'm sure every organization has access to a network or customers or focus groups that they can share information with. So if you're doing that for your products, why not do that for your services as well? Ask them what works, what doesn't work, because again, making assumptions might not always be the best. And it doesn't always have to happen overnight. Making small changes can be really useful. If it's just looking at, say, what are your projects is starting with looking at alt tags on images, that's great. If one of them is looking at links on the page, that's a start again. So it doesn't have to be one big project, and it doesn't all have to change overnight. Making those small changes based on customer feedback and what customers need can make a world of difference to a lot of people. And one of the things as well that I think a lot of people always think is accessibility. Once you've done your accessibility work, that's it, the project's finished. But it's always changing and it's always continuing. So I think it's important to not just stop a project like accessibility. It's a continual project that always has to be reviewed and kept up to date, and keep those channels of communication open as well.
Perfect, that's good advice, Louise. Okay. So I think that just about wraps up the questions for now. So I hope you found it all useful and can take some of the practical advice into your own organization and start opening up your digital channels to be more accessible to your audiences. So our contact details are on the screen now if you'd like to reach out to either of us directly for more information on anything that we have discussed. I guess one last thing that I would just like to mention before we sign off, for all of our listeners out there, we're offering you the use of our web accessibility tool, Browsealoud, free for 90 days to really help support your online users during this global pandemic. So if you'd like to know more or try it out for yourself, you can visit the link on the slide there, or as I say, you can contact either Louise or I directly. So thanks for listening, everyone, and have a great afternoon.